Hello, I am going to read a book called Dangerous Company, Dark Tales from Tinseltown by Bart. Just in case you guys want to know what this is about, it says, in Hollywood, reality always teeters on the verge of fiction. Outlandish paydays encounter outsized egos, fading beauties fight desperately to retain an illusion of youth. Moguls plot and feud while bitter enemies air kiss over lunch at the Ivy. The stakes are higher than anywhere else, and the dreams are crazier. No one else can capture the insanity like Bart, the editor-in-chief of the Showbiz Bible Variety. Bart has presided over the follies and iniquities of the business for many years, observing the ups and downs of the players with detached, knowing amusement. As Cindy Adams recently proclaimed in the New York Post, a Peter doesn't know it. It never happened. Dangerous Company explores the turbulent lives of the celebrities and studio executives who inhabit Starlight Terrace, an exclusive neighborhood nestled high in the Hollywood Hills. A literary agent covers up a surreal screenwriting scandal in order to close on a commission. A studio lawyer tries to reconcile a director-producer riff, using an unspeakable secret about their children as leverage. And a stranger brokers a suspicious deal that lands him face down in his own pool. So, alrighty, I'll just probably read a chapter or a few chapters. I don't know. A few chapters maybe, because the first chapter is like 7 pages. And go from there. Dangerous Company, Chapter 1, The Founder. The way I see it, I invented Starlight Terrace. Historians may not consider that a contribution to humanity, but it contributed to a lot of moi. Sure, there was something bogus about its origins, but this is Hollywood after all. Everything's a little on the bogus side. When I first happened on Starlight Terrace, I was just resigning myself to the fact that I wouldn't step into the shoes of my role model, Zsa Zsa Gabor. So what was a middle-aged Hungarian Yinta actress going to do? Take out a real estate license and hit the streets, that's what. One of those streets was a gorgeous little enclave nestled high in the Hollywood Hills that time had somehow passed by. There were a few neglected houses shrouded by a eucalyptus grove, but the neighborhood was virtually impossible to find, and the street consisted of a maze of potholes. It was called Rattery Lane, which didn't exactly convey glitz and glamour. So I decided Rattery Lane had a future. I envisioned a secluded hideaway for stars and celebrities, a gated community with an aura of exclusivity, and it would be all mine. That is, I would lock up its business, or at least try to. All this was pretty ambitious, given that I've only just received my real estate license, become Eva Vane and Associates. My real name was Eva Vanya, but Hungarian names don't look good on real estate signs. Changing my name was easier than changing the name of the street. After fruitless visits to the city council, I simply tore down the Rattery Lane signs and installed the new ones saying Starlight Terrace, and I dropped $1,000 on the post office to pay attention. Bang! I had my Hollywood foothold. Of course, there was some practical issues to deal with, like the existing residents. One was a plumber who dropped acid, had a jungle for a lawn, and kept decrepit camper in front of his house. I finally persuaded him to sell by telling him the city was installing a new sewer system to his front yard. I even hired a work crew for a day to start digging. I placed ads in the Daily Variety and got lucky when a talent manager named Marty Gillis decided to buy the plumber's place. Gillis was an old queen who had the kind of contacts that perfectly fit my plans. He basically tore down the house, creating a big white faux Tudor. Sure enough, Denise Turley, one of Marty's big-time clients, saw his house, and I sold her a sprawling neo-Italianate place down the street on which she lavished well north of $500,000 for renovations. I sold another place to Eric Hoffman, a major matcha at Warner Brothers, which was good because I wanted Starlight Terrace to attract the suits as well as the talent. Then came Elizabeth Donahue, who's in charge of daytime programming at the ABC network, and finally I made a big score, Tom Patch. He was becoming one of the hottest young stars in town, and he put down $3 million for what was basically a teardown. Starlight Terrace was certainly a hot address. I persuaded the residents to contribute to the installation of gates at the top and bottom of the Outlandish street. Now the big realtors like Coldwell Banker, the guys who wouldn't even give an interview to a failed Hungarian actress, was knocking at my door, wanting to buy my company. You're just the sort of visionary we need in our company, one guy tells me. He even offered me a scroll sterling my leadership in real estate. But I told him where to put his scroll, and that and that he was lucky it wasn't a plaque. I needed Caldwell Banker before. I didn't need them now. Besides, a company like that doesn't know how to do business with celebrities. When you're dealing with stars like Tom Patrick and East Turley, you have to follow certain rules. First, you pacify their managers, their accountants, and all their other functionaries so they don't get paranoid. You even hint that they'll get a taste of the action. You deliberately place absurdly high price on the property, knowing that each of these mavens will try negotiating you down. When the star finally shows up in person, you play it totally cool and never sell. If anything, you might even cite a few problems with the place. Leaky faucets, an old furnace, that sort of thing. When the talk gets to the price, you go right back to the original number because you know that a star has no sense of money and will pay anything if he really wants the place. Of course, none of this worked on my biggest deal on Starlight Terrace. The property in question, it was really a sort of mini compound, sat at the top of the street and had a great view of the Century City and the ocean. It was a fine old Spanish revival, made 9,000 square feet, maybe 9,000 square feet, and it was owned by a snooty couple named Penrose who had downtown banking connections, sort of people who spent most of their time at their new Port Beach estate. I tried to phone them several times, but never got through, and my letters wouldn't answer either. I never understood what they were doing there to begin with. They belonged in Bel Air or in a fine old Hancock Park mansion. Then one day I was showing a house down the street when I saw an ambulance heading to the Penrose house. I did the old realtor trick, racing to the house and pretending to be part of the medical team. Anyway, Mr. Penrose had died of a heart attack. And within 48 hours, I was showing the place to Barry Gow. I was already nervous. Gow was a good-looking guy who wore a black leather jacket and black jeans and had a vague Lebanese or Moroccan accent. He was from some place that was dangerous. When I told him the widow wanted $3 million, he immediately gave me 6 reasons why $2 million was the right number, and that he would write a check immediately, but would not negotiate. When I balked, he said something nice about my jewelry and pointed out that since he wasn't using a realtor, I might take a much bigger commission if I played ball. I got back to him the next morning, cutting the selling price from $3 million to $2.6 million, warning it would not go lower. Barry Gow responded by playing dirty. He sent 2 other realtors to visit the widow to cut me out. At the same time, he sent me 24 roses with a note saying, "Sorry about this, Jaja." We finally closed the deal at $2.7 million, and Barry promptly made 10,000 contribution to repainting the community gates. All right, I thought, maybe he wouldn't be so bad for Starlight Terrace after all. Well, I was wrong. As things turned out, Barry Gow was to become the biggest pain in the ass Starlight Terrace had ever encountered. And I was blamed by the residents for bringing him in a sort of there goes the neighborhood kind of thing. The whole experience made me realize that I had created something of a nightmare for myself in giving birth to Starlight Terrace. Sure, I made a lot of money by selling most of the homes, but when anything went bad, I got the phone calls. Why couldn't I get the city to put the streets in better shape? Why couldn't I improve garbage collection? Most important, why couldn't I get rid of Barry Gow? Hell, I wasn't the mayor of Starlight Terrace. I dreamed it up, but it didn't mean its problems were my responsibility. But then Hollywood types are all spoiled. Since everyone always tells them they're perfect, they need someone to blame for their occasional imperfections, even if that someone is merely a Hungarian yenta. Chapter 2. Or next chapter, Ghostwriter, because they don't have chapter 1, chapter 2, but the Ghostwriter. It started on one of those Santa Ana days when scorching desert winds blast westward across the city and the air smells blowtorch. The relentless winds blow the smog offshore, giving Santa Monica Bay a vast yellow ring, so it looks like a bathtub in desperate need of scrubbing. Los Angeles settles into an eerie lull when the Santa Ana blows, as though warning the earthquake may rumble. Fires may rage and people may seem vaguely psychotic. Before moving to LA 12 years ago, I read about Santa Ana days and Joan did it in slouching towards Bethlehem, and her words blew me away. I even tried to option her book for a client once, but she wanted too much money. Though nothing good ever happens during Santa Ana time, something very good was about to happen to Sydney Garman, and I was to convey the news, a fact that pleased me greatly. As a new agent in the literary department of the William Morris Agency, most of my time is spent telling people things they don't want to know. A studio has passed on the script, a director hates to rewrite and pulling out of the movie. That is the usual gist of my daily rituals, but what I was about to tell Sydney Garman was quite different. And I was stoked, so especially for the client. Though not yet 30, Sydney had been in terrible funk during most of the 3 years I represented him, and I felt vaguely responsible. He was a classic case of the kid who walks into a casino, wins $1 million, and then can't ever get lucky again. At age 24, Sydney had struck pay dirt by selling his first screenplay for $1.2 million. It wasn't the usual actual action yarn. It was texture, densely written father-son story about love and betrayal. It was made into a movie that received good reviews, did reasonable business, and accounted for 2 Oscar nominations. More relevant, it won Sydney several high-paying assignments to write other scripts for important studio directors. Not only had he filled on these jobs, but 2 other spec scripts of his also found no buyers. By the time I started representing him, he was locked in a textbook case of a writer's block. He bought a huge house on Starlight Terrace, drove a Porsche, and had a hot girlfriend, but he had nonetheless surrendered to his own failure. In his mind, he had gasped the brass ring and then stupidly, unforgivingly let it slip away. Despite his hangdog, terminally depressed nature, I found myself liking Sydney. He was a gangly kid with fine features, an aquiline nose, and haunted teal eyes who moved with an almost feline grace. He had made a pass at me 2 or 3 times, but we understood the unwritten rule. If I were to represent him effectively, our relationship had to be kept purely professional. Besides, he needed an analyst more than another quick fuck. I knew that, and so did I. He knew that, and so did I. Sauntering into my cramped office that morning, Sydney went through his habitual moves, leafing through the several books that I lately accumulated, scanning the pages of the scripts that lay across my desk, pursuing the coverage provided by the office freelance readers, never making eye contact even after he slumped into the chair across from my desk. He ran his hand through his fine black hair, which looked badly in need of shampoo. "It's going to be too hot today," he finally mumbled. "Something's going to catch fire. Always does." I decided to forge ahead. "Brace yourself, Sydney. I mean, really, get it together." Sydney stiffened. Finally, he made eye contact. "What's bugging you, Stacy?" "Fox took your script off the market. They made a preemptive bid of $1.5 million. It's a take it or leave it time. I propose we take it." "My script? I don't get it." "Hello? We're talking about friends and enemies. Are you with me, Sydney? It went out last Friday to 12 places." $1 million? $1.5 million. Of the 12 people who saw it, eight expressed interest. I think we might still get other offers, but Fox wants to close it out. The market for spec scripts is ice cold, Sydney. That's why I recommend friends and enemies. I don't fucking believe this. No fucking way. Don't go into shock on me, Sydney. When I first saw it, I told you it's the best thing you've written since you first. Best thing? Sure. So we have a business decision to make here. We take the offer or we go fishing for something bigger. Sydney rose from his chair, as though facing reality for the first time. "I can't make that decision." "Stacey, not until I make a phone call." "A phone call? Am I missing something here? Have you hired a business manager since I last saw you? A new agent, maybe? Don't get paranoid on me, babe." "Okay, then here's my phone. Make your call." It's a personal call. I didn't like what I was hearing. "Tell me there's nothing weird going on here, Sydney. I mean, you did write the script, didn't you?" "Of course I wrote the fucking script," Sydney shot back, but his face had a deer in the headlights frozen stare. As he bolted from the office, he seemed to grunt. Or maybe it was a sob. I was in panic for the next hour. I called Sylvia Lear at Fox and told her I need some time before I could give her an answer. True to form, she threw a tantrum telling me I had promised to take it off the market, that I was double-crossing her. I walked down the hall to talk to Mendel Kaplan, the chief of the agency literary department, who had anointed himself my mentor. Immensely fat and huge swath of white hair, Mendel was a sort of agent who had long, pointless conversations with his clients, kibitzing, words in the Hollywood industry, right? Kibitzing about their investments and their golf scores. He also, I suspected, spent too much time talking to his own broker. When he finally hung up, he signaled me into his office, which was 4 times the size of mine. Mendel rose from the desk, stretched and scratched his balls. NASDAQ is down 8 points. The net stocks are crashing, and I don't want to hear any more bad news, he said. What makes you think I have bad news? You got the look on your face of someone who just found a cockroach in her matzo ball. Okay, I got a problem. There's an offer of $1.5 million on the table from Fox for a spec script. They want me to take it off the market, so take it off. The writer won't let me. He wants to think about it. Who's the writer? Sidney Garman. He's ice cold. That's weird. Can't get arrested. That's what's weird. Can't get it. Sorry, y'all. Sidney Garman. He's ice cold. That's what's weird. Can't get arrested. Who does he think he is? Michael fucking Chickton? Tell him to close. He's a weird kid. I don't think I could push him too hard. Look, the spec market is in the shitter. $1.5 million is more than we gotten for a script in months. I know. Paramount had some interest, but they were talking $800,000, something like that. Look, Stacey, honey, I'm calling Fox. I'm telling them they got a deal. If this Garmin kid gives you a hard time, blame it on me. Tell him our office got his signals mitts. I mean, that kid's been starving, right? Is he going to sue or something? I nodded and retreated. There was a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. Nuna was old school. He didn't think twice about strong-arming a client. This was the William Morris office, after all. We also knew what was best for the client. We always knew what was best for the client. Mendel also was under pressure to produce more revenue. That much I understood. Not enough writers were working and not enough material was moving. Back in my office, I was getting calls about another script. They were all passes. A producer from Warner's wanted to know, are you hiding all the good stuff, Stacey? You're sending me shit. I hung up on him. The calls kept coming, but nothing from Sidney. I couldn't focus. I sensed something had gone wrong with Sidney Garman in his script, that somehow it would blow up in my face. It was 7:30 when I finally worked my way through my phone list. I was just emerging from the elevator when I saw Sidney standing in the lobby. He walked over, looking distracted. I want you to come with me, Stacey. There's someone you have to meet. I have a dinner at Morton's in an hour. I want to go home and take a shower. Sidney just stared at me. I need you, Stacey, okay? You always told me if you need me real bad, where is the guy I have to meet? The barely Wilshire. He's at the bar. It's a 2-minute walk. The night was sweltering. People were moving in slow motion, undulated rather than walking, like creatures caught in some sci-fi movie. I was sweating by the time I reached the hotel. The tall man sitting in the far end of the long, varnished bar had that vaguely effect look of an artist who had fought many battles with both the moves and the bottle. His eyes sent out the message that he stood above the rules and governed other men. Shaking his hand, I instantly disliked him. This is Sidney Garman, I heard Sidney Garman say. This is my father. And that makes you, I'm Sidney Garman Jr., my client explained. We have some things to explain, Stacey. I have assured my father that you are entirely trustworthy. To start with, maybe you could explain why you never use a junior on your screenplays. Sidney's senior sitting at the bartender. He was already nursing a scotch. I've been out of business for 20 years. He said in a resonant voice that itself was a bit too mannered. His dark hair, streaked with gray, was combed straight back on his head and had the sort of laminated glistening normally imparted by a hairdresser. I suppose Sidney decided there was no need. Sidney had both ordered vodka and tonic. Let me cut to the chase, Sidney Jr. said, his hand flickering away moisture from his forehead. I didn't write the screenplay you sold today. My father did. Reflexively, I looked over my shoulder to determine whether anyone could overhear us. But the certificate of authorship, I protested. There are documents. I know, Sydney Sr. replied. These things have to be corrected. I have to talk to our legal department. We could ignore this. We could argue that this was an advertent. We don't want to correct anything, Sydney Sr. announced, like a schoolmaster instructing an errant pupil. We want the documents to say that Sydney wrote the script, not I. As far as the studios are concerned, the screenplay marks my son return to form. It's his work. I felt panic welling up. And exactly what's the purpose of this description? Is this some sort of exotic gift certificate? No, this is a business decision, Sydney Sr. continued. I am 63 years old. This town is run by young people who don't want to read something written by someone who's 63 years old. No less have a meetings with him to discuss rewrites. Sydney has lots of friends around the studios. He understands the youth demo, as they call it. He talks the talk. And I can't write worth shit, Sydney Jr. interjected, taking a long drag on his vodka and tonic. My son seems to be down on himself. Surely a temporary condition. He's a fine talent, you know, the ability to yell. He was studying the classics, really excelling, till I dropped out. And then when he goes to Sydney, I cut in. You are an agent to the core, Sydney Sr. said with a patronizing smile that made my skin crawl. My son and I have reached an understanding whereby the check goes to him. I receive 75% of the earnings. He will receive 25%, and you will, of course, commission the full amount. It's too risky, I said. I won't go along with this. Besides, it's crazy. I mean, there are older writers working for the studios. There's Bill Goldman, who wrote Butch Cassidy. There's run out of names already, Stacy? Sydney Sr. asked. Look, it's my dad's idea. These are his scripts, and this is his plan, said Sydney Jr. Scripts? You said scripts? I'm well into 2 other screenplays, said Sydney Sr. There will be an overroom. I turned to Sydney Jr., and you're willing to march into Fox and represent yourself as the author of a screenplay that you had nothing to do with. You're willing to follow through with this deception. Sydney Jr. nodded. He squeezed the lime from his drink into his tongue and winced with a sour taste. As my new agent, you might be curious about my screenwriting talent, Sydney Sr. said smoothly. You're too young to remember, but I wrote and directed 2 films in the late 1960s, back when the artists could go out and make a movie without a big star, without special effects. My films did respectably, but they weren't hits. Then along came Spielberg and Lucas, and suddenly all movies had to be Star Wars or Indiana Jones. I had money. I moved to Paris. I stopped writing. I painted and traveled. Sydney's mother and I divorced by then, and I suppose it's safe to say that I enjoyed the company of beautiful women. He disappeared on us, Sydney Jr. said, until last week. I tried to stay in touch. I sent letters. I sent money, but Sydney's mother tore up the letters and sent back the money. The picture was crystallizing now. Sydney Jr.'s big script sales 6 years earlier had dealt with the father-son betrayal. It was a searing story of a son tracking down the father who had abandoned him and in a reckoning revenge. The passion and the venom of that story had fueled his movie and had marked the beginning and end of his career. He had never again been able to match his initial work. I know you're concerned about the risks, Sydney Sr. said. I think we should let you think things over. If you're interested in working with us, I would urge you to call Fox and tell them the deal is closed at $1.5 million. If not, let us know by morning. Any questions? A glance from father to son. The father, olignously handsome, setting forth his ultimatum. The son, worried but submissive, apparently willing to bury his anger. I briskly shook hands with them both and retreated from the bar. Driving back to my place, I put the top down and felt my hair blow free in the hot night. I couldn't get over the notion that Junior didn't seem to understand what was overtaking him. He was in denial. On the other hand, that was a trait that I shared with him. I, too, was skilled at denying certain glaring, obvious facts, such as the fact that I was 10 pounds overweight. Make that 15. Or the fact that I was a slob, my apartment in permanent disarray, my wardrobe in day-to-day crisis. I changed my bedding only when my boyfriend got on my case, which I forestalled by willingly sleeping on the wet spots. I was habitually late for appointments, even urgent ones. I was even 15 minutes late for my annual bonus meeting at the agency when my supervisor informed me how much I would make on the top of my normal salary. All my life I had gotten away with things for fairly obvious reasons. My glibness, my ability to make people laugh. In the business of towering egos, I was skilled at self-mockery. I was not a threat to anyone, but when I was on my game, I could persuade anyone to do anything. Kind of cool. You have real, Mendel Kaplan once told me after I helped him re-sign a client who had already said yes to the shark agents over at CAA. Of course, this gift for persuasion masked my own submissiveness. My shrink told me that because my father died when I was 4, I was in a perpetual need of male approval, particularly older male approval, which accounted for 2 affairs with older men that dragged on far too long. My English professor in college looked alarmingly like Sidney Garman Sr., replete with the smug self-confidence. He dumped me after 6 months. Perhaps I was presently overcompensating by having an affair with a 22-year-old trainee at the agency who was a preppy, cute, but terminally insecure. I sometimes wonder whether I could ever have succeeded at anything other than agenting. Surely not on the same financial level. In a short time, I had managed to build a stable of 24 clients, most of them writers, 2 of them young directors, all of them under the age of 35. At an agency dominated by kvetchy old men, I was the infant terrible who was in touch with what Mendel Kaplan called the zeitgeist. The studios were rapid in their pursuit of the youth demo, and I controlled the writers who, in their eyes, had the keys to this kingdom. And all bogus, since most of the clients detested the notion that they were hot because they were young or could deliver the young audience. Most hated their teen years and dreaded revisiting them. But that's where the big bucks resided. It was bogus, but it was working for me. With any luck at all, my income would hit $1 million within a couple years. Mind you, I have no idea how to spend that kind of money other than paying at Prada and Chanel or getting a bigger BMW. But money was what it was all about. I had to go for it all day long, and all around me at the office, I heard the drone of voices insistently demanding $1 million against 10 or $10 million against 5. The later number representing the percentage of net or gross receipts that will be due to the star or director in the form of contingent compensation. The mantra had turned the agency into a cathedral of money at which the clients came to worship. The hot night had become sporadic, and when I reached home, I dozed off on the sofa, only to be awakened by a cold cloth on my forehead. I opened my eyes to see Ethan standing there, my boy lover. "Are you all right, Stace? Heard you cancel dinner. Looked like shit." Hovering above me in the gloom, he was wearing only his white shirt and jockeys, and he looked alarmingly like Tom Cruise in Risky Business. There was no coincidence, it turned out, as he flicked on some music and started to dance the Tom Cruise dance, and despite myself, I had to smile. "I'm sweaty and depressed," I shouted over the din, but that did not slow him down until the music ended and he came to rest on the sofa. One leg levitated above the other, as in Risky Business. "I told you I'm depressed. There's a crisis at the office." He just stared back, flashing this lame post-preppy smile. One of his boy toy games was to reenact love scenes from favorite past movies, and we had worked our way through Belle de Four and A Man and a Woman, definitely bypassing Last Tango in Paris until Risky Business confronted us. And Ethan was unrelenting. "You're a hooker, remember?" Ethan said brightly. "You're Rebecca De Mornay, and it's not financially viable to say no to Tom." I couldn't hold back laughter. "Come here, you pointy, pasty little bastard," I called out to him. At 10:15 the next morning, Mendel Kaplan presided over a staff meeting of the literary department, reiterating the need to boost commissions. "Wherever you look in this agency, the mid-list clients are hurting us," Mendel declaimed in his nasal tones. "Whether actors, writers, or directors, the mid-list people cost more to service than they bring in. Painful though it may be, you got to start peeling them off the client list. Those are the orders across every department in this agency. We want to sign the star writers and directors. We want to bring young comers. We don't want Mr. In Between." Even as Mendel was concluding his peroration, 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 I could see Alan Saperstein rolling his eyes in exasperation. A burly man in his 50s, Alan had been the key rival for Mendel's job, and he had made little effort to hide his disdain. "Cut the shit, Mendel," Alan blurted. "You're instructing us to resign our older clients, which will land us right into the middle of an agency class action suit. We can't do it. And besides, we shouldn't do it. It's wrong." "There's a word you don't understand, Mendel, but it's wrong." That's a word you don't understand, Mendel, but it's wrong. I just, when there's like the key moments in this story for me to read out loud, I just fuck it right up, don't I? Anyways, I'm talking midlist. I'm not talking old, Mendel protested. Midlist, shimless. Did these dirtbags in human resources teach you that euphemism? Alan snorted. The debate was still raging, and when I snuck out to return, I'm talking midlist. I'm not talking old, Mendel protested. Midlist, schmidlist. Did those dirtbags in human resources teach you that euphemism? Alan snorted. The debate was still raging when I snuck out to return to my office. I looked at the phone sheet. The first call of the day was from Sydney Garman. It didn't say senior or junior, but I could tell it wasn't junior's number. The deal, Sydney Senior said, his voice a little too unctuous. Could you give me an update? It's closed, I replied, but once again, one of you has to sign the papers. With a deal of this size, there will be lots of meetings with development staff. With prospective directors, they may sign a producer, so you have to decide who provides the FaceTime. That's been decided, Sydney Senior purred. Relax. This isn't a drug smuggling. No, but it's fraud. Your son is representing that he wrote a script that in point of fact you wrote. I could blow my career and he could blow his. He has no career, came the reply. He's a one-story writer and he's told a story. And you were the principal character in that story. And it was a work of fiction, Sydney Senior said calmly. I'm meeting my son for lunch today. We will rehearse the initial meetings carefully. We will be well prepared. How do you know what they'll be asking? I'm not suffering from Alzheimer's, he said. I know the drill. It hasn't changed that much over the years. As usual, Sydney Senior utters confidence grated on me. Don't assume they're a bunch of dumb kids, I cautioned. They'll be firing off questions about character motivation, about structure. Arrogance can be very risky in this sort of situation. I could hear Sydney Senior take a breath. Listen to your own words, Stacy, and then tell me about arrogance. If I walked into that studio, those kids would be dismissive of me as you are. With that, Sydney Senior hung up. I felt a surge of anger and stood up from my desk, but before I could go anywhere, my assistant was muttering at me that 2 other clients were on the line and the third one was waiting to see me. It was literally an hour later when I finally flung down my headset and fled the office for the quiet of the bathroom. By the time I returned to my office, my decision had been made. I canceled my lunch date and walked down to my car for a drive out to Sydney's house. I had not been to his Starlight Terrace place since his enormous Halloween bash a year earlier. Sydney told me he had spent $60,000 on food, booze, and an extraordinary range of spooky special effects, skeletons rising from the garden, ghouls poking out of the chimneys, and so on. He had spared nothing, and his 300 guests relish in hospitality, which only he and I knew couldn't really afford. Sydney, I had been suspected, was turning into a sort of playboy prince. He had brought an 8-bedroom imitation French villa and had refurbished it, filling its rooms with French antiques and objects d'art. Only its third floor betrayed the truest taste of its owner. The French motif abruptly ended as one climbed the stairs. Up there it was a bachelor's wonderland of bright red walls, a state-of-art entertainment center, slot machines, a disco, and built-in caves for fun and games. Several months earlier, a life-young wannabe actress named Deidre had become Sydney's live-in girlfriend, and it was she who answered the door, clad in a bikini that provided minimal coverage. Stacy, we didn't expect. We were just going for a swim. Sure. It seemed weird to follow a bikini-clad blonde through a darkened library filled with first editions. We found Sydney walking across the yard towards the pool, wearing jeans and his customary dazed expression, his hair askew, and he had a 2-day stubble. What's happening, Sydney asked. Let's sit down somewhere, I said. He led me to the cluster of the upholstered chairs adjacent to the pool. Like everything else in the house, they were top of the line, but desperately in need of cleaning. Deidre followed us. Look, I'm not famous for subtlety. I began. You hate your father. You wrote a screenplay describing your hatred for your father. I suppose that's true. You suppose? What's to suppose? If you hate this man, how are you going to spend the next weeks and months of your life impersonating him, defending his work before studio bureaucrats? What's wrong with you? He wants to start over, a new relationship, and you trust him? He's a conceited, narcissistic asshole, Sydney. You know it as well as I. Is she talking about your father? Deidre put in. Sydney ignored her. What's worse, I said. He's a fucking loser. What's he done all these years? He's floated around Europe, living with rich women. He's a world-class leech. He wrote a professional goddamn screenplay, that much you have to admit. I wish I'd written it. Who knows whether he wrote it? For all we know, he's got another writer stashed in Paris like he got you stashed in LA. Don't be ridiculous, Stacy. The guy's an artist. He even looks like an artist, Deidre purred. He's very good looking for an older man. Think about what you're getting into, Sydney, I persisted. The hassles with the studio, the fights with directors. You have to get your father to do the rewrites. You have to control that son of a bitch into playing the game, not bolting off to Paris again. Sydney was scrunching up his body, as was his habit when under assault. He looked like a child trying to get into the fetal position. Deidre was all over him, rubbing his back supportively. Don't let her depress you, honey, she was cooing. Talk to me, Sydney, I implored. Finally, there was a momentary eye contact. I'll lay it out for you, Stacy said. I have no career. I can't write. You know that. I know that. I have no money left. I'm going to lose the house. This scam would get me back into action. It would pay the mortgage. It may even get me a life. His life. Sydney shrugged, got to his feet in jeans, and all dove into the pool. He paddled around, facing away from me. I realized that our meeting was over. I headed for the front door. Deidre was tracking me. As I let myself out, I turned to her. I had to give it a try, I said stupidly. You really are a bitch, said Deidre. During the following weeks, my life seemed to curling out of control. Arno Prokop, a brilliant young video director I had discovered, signed a deal with Warner Brothers to direct his first feature and promptly defeated to Endeavor agency. My tensions with Mendel were rising. In the midst of all of this, continuing her habitual bad timing, my mother decided to visit from Chicago, and it happened to meet Ethan. The young man is an assistant, a typist, she inquired. We don't have typists anymore, Mom. He's my boyfriend. We don't have much in common. We don't talk much. He's for recreation. The job is making you coarse, my mother said. I was coarse before I got the job. Don't be coarse, she said. It was her favorite word. Amid all of this, the only thing that seemed to be going according to plan, incredibly, was the situation with the two Sydneys. Meetings had taken place between Sydney Jr. and 3 Fox developing executives assigned to friends and enemies. According to the studio's project executive, Mark Colvin, the meetings had gone well. Before putting it out to directors, it was important to strengthen the narrative arc, especially the third arc, Colvin explained in the customary development tease. Colvin had gone to Princeton and had the Harvard Business School, but now as a creative guru, he felt credentialed to fix my script, any script, and re-edit any movie. The thing that impressed me was Sydney's flexibility, his willingness to listen. Colvin went on. A few years ago, he had a bad rep. He was difficult. What Colvin didn't know, of course, was that Sydney could afford to be flexible because he wasn't going to be doing rewrites that would fall to Sydney Sr. Even more surprising, father and son seemed to be bonding. Sydney Sr. was spending more and more time at his son's house on Starlight Terrace, hanging by the pool with Deidre. Now and then he would even borrow a laptop and do his writing in the library. The father was renting a college in Venice, but never mentioned whether there was a woman in his life or whether he found friends. Sydney Sr. knew I disliked him, or distrusted him, or both, and we rarely exchanged words. Once when I called, Sydney Sr. answered the phone instead. I realize you think I'm some sort of interloper, he said, but I would suggest you look at my results. My son is upbeat. He has money. It is all going well. So far, so good, I mumbled in retort. I think you should be aware that a second screenplay is ready for the market, he said. I think it's even better than the first. How did you write a screenplay when you've been working on changes? It was 2/3 done before I met you, he said. It's more physical than friends and enemies. There's more action. It's called Past the Peril. I was dumbfounded. What I thought was a one-time accident was now threatening to become an ongoing drama. I don't know what to say, was all I could muster. Happily, your job is not to say, it's to sell. Goodbye. The next day, Sydney Jr. burst into my office, wide-eyed. Oh, fuck, was all he could say as he slumped into a chair. What happened? Did Fox fire you? The second script. It's even better. It's fucking great. He plunked the screenplay atop the pile on my desk. I'm not sure I'm ready for round 2 yet. Do me a favor, Stacy. Read it tonight. Call me in the morning. He got up and practically flew out my office. I canceled dinner with a business manager. He represented several important writers, and I knew I was desperate to sign them. You must be on the hot deal. You must be on to a hot deal. Either that or you're in love. No, I take it back. It's a hot deal. Have it your way, I said. Ethan was petulant, even when he learned I would be spending the evening with a script. We've been bickering about our rituals of lovemaking. Our movie game had begun to grow old. The scenes he wanted to replicate basically had the little girl doing all the work. Ethan argued this fit our personalities. Boy-toy relationships never last longer than a couple months. My friend Annie had warned me, and she was proving me to be right. Sidney Jr., meanwhile, was also correct in his assessment. His father's second script was even sharper than his first. Reading it, I came to understand that the old guy was doing what the old guy was doing. He was posing a classical approach to structure and character on contemporary subject matter. He had mastered the basic tools of the trade from the William Goldmans and not only Johan Johnsons of the old, but weirdly, his head was anchored in today's world. With the dialogue scenes of the older writers tend to run to 5 or 6 pages, his was crisp. Though it was 11 o'clock by the time I finished, I called Sidney Jr. to give him my reaction. "I can't believe what's happening," he said. "I'll call Dad." He hung up, even as I realized that was the first time he had used the term Dad. A few moments later, my phone rang again. It was Sidney Jr.'s voice, still breathless. "Dad is thrilled," he said. "He wants to have a dinner tomorrow. The 4 of us, at Mr. Chow's. He wants to set things right." What things? 8 p.m. tomorrow, and he was gone again. There was something about the idea of dining with Senior and the Junior together that gave me the creeps, especially at Mr. Chow's, a restaurant that, for whatever reason, had become the industry gathering place after being deserted for over a decade. That was the point, I realized. Sidney Sr. felt the restaurant's fortunes reflected his own. Chow had made an amazing comeback, and now so had Sidney Garman Sr. Sorry, I just like the light. The place was packed that next night. The ponytail matriarch looked at me like I was discarded pot sticker. I was 20 minutes late as usual. Sidney Sr., elegant in black blazer and tan slacks, was seated at a prime table. Next to him was Deidre, ablaze in sequins, blonde hair glistening, and then his son, clad in jeans and a ratty sports shirt. I assumed Sidney Sr. had dropped $50 on the matriarch because his table was wedged between Warren Beatties and, on the other side, Barry Diller and Mike Nichols. Father and son were cheerful, almost giddy. Tensions of early encounters seemed to have melted. I reported that I had already submitted Paths of Pearl to 12 companies that morning, demanding that they give their answers within 48 hours. I wanted to lend a sense of urgency. I only submitted to people who had the authority to say buy or pass, no one else. Sidney Sr. seemed beamed as Deidre turned to him. "I'm proud of you," she said. "It's amazing." This place is full of industry people, I cautioned. Let's be careful who says what to whom, if you get my drift. Sidney Jr. nodded. He looked oddly fragile next to his father, who radiated a certain old-world panache in the room already overheated with expensive egos. As I studied the adjoining table, Sidney Sr. started spinning stories of his favorite haunts in Paris, of the companions he hung out with, and of his freewheeling jaunts to Ibiza, Sardinia, and other pleasure spots. Deidre, in childlike fascination, was observing it all. The waiter arrived, and we ordered the usual: Mr. Child's exotica, seaweed, dice squab, drunken fish. I took advantage of the break in the conversation. "Tell me, Sidney, how did you make ends meet in Paris? You weren't writing screenplays yet." His gaze borrowed into mine. "You're a very practical young woman, aren't you, Stacy? I'm an agent. I spend my time making people's deals, finagling rewrite money, angling for more back-end points. I don't think great thoughts. I do people's fiscal laundry, wash their socks and underwear, that sort of thing. It seems to me you do these things very well." "Thank you, Sidney. Now about Europe." "The good life?" "Odds and ends, really," he replied. "I did some translating. I wrote some articles. There were a couple of blacklisted American writers who were fed secret assignments from Hollywood but had forgotten how to write, so I was sort of the ghostwriter for the ghosts. I managed to make the acquaintance of a beautiful and wealthy women. They are not in short supply in Paris, you know. It became too easy, so I decided to prove something to myself, prove something even to my son." Senior Jr. was listening carefully now, and his father noticed. "I tried to stay in touch, son, as I told you before, but your mother made it impossible. And one day, that very fine film you wrote came to Paris, and I went to see it. That was really when I decided to sit down and do some writing. You inspired me, you might say. And having done so, I decided to come home." "That's very touching," Deidre said. She dabbed away a tear. "You were heavy in that movie," I put in. "You don't deny that?" "You were the heavy in that movie," I put in. "You don't deny that?" The food was being served now. However, Sydney Sr. was demonstrating to Deidre how to wrap her diced squab, applying some plum sauce, shredded scallions, and other accoutrements, and wrapping it all in a lettuce leaf. He had no intention of responding to my thrusts. It occurred to me that after only a month in Los Angeles, he seemed to blend in, chameleon-like. The rest of the room would see him as an older producer or director, still attractive, a fading room. And Deidre was the admiring nymphet who was willingly accommodating the attentions of her mentor. It was his son who somehow seemed the odd man out. "You okay, Sydney?" I inquired. "Do you really think Pearls of Paths of Pearl will sell for the same kind of numbers as Friends and Enemies?" he asked. "It wouldn't surprise me. It's a better piece, and there's a want to see out there for your work. I can't believe I'm going to start a new round. People asking me what inspired me about these characters, probing what's in my head. But you're bringing it off. That's no small trick." "Is this going to be my life, Stace? Impersonating my father? When I read his stuff, he's so goddamn facile. He's some piece of work. Remember, Sydney, it mustn't defeat you. It's got to get you writing again." Junior jammed a dumpling into his mouth. He looked from his father to Deidre. He seemed to be inspiring her. Junior said with a scowl. "He seemed to be inspiring her," Junior said with a scowl. Pastor Pearl had gone out into the market on Tuesday afternoon. By close of business Thursday, we had 4 offers. The lowest was $1.2 million, the highest was $2.2 million. When Mendel heard about my latest auction, Sidney Garman was suddenly no longer my client alone. I was sharing him with Mendel Kaplan, and he was reporting details of the transaction to senior executives at the agency, as well as leaking the news to Daily Variety. "Every deal has its own rhythm," he lectured me. "You have to learn to feel the rhythm and respond. I already picked up the beat last time around," I snapped. When Daily Variety reported the whirlwind around his bids the next morning, Warner Brothers hastily closed $2.5 million. Not wanting to break the news on the phone, I arranged to meet father and son at the Starlight Terrace. They were lunching beside the pool when I got there. A new housekeeper was serving salad Nicois replet with an expensive white wine. Sydney Sr. rose to greet me, kissing me on each cheek. Pulling out my chair, Junior sat eating. When I announced the price, Junior turned pale and rested his forehead against the table. Senior smiled broadly. We better get you a new wardrobe, son," he said. "You're heading to a new orbit." All right, I'm gonna leave it there because I'm a lot and my brain can't function. But I like it so far. I don't know if I like it. It's a different type of writing for me. There's a lot of words that I wasn't expecting to not know, because it's a story about Hollywood and blah, 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 blah. But it's pretty interesting to kind of know some of the deals and the ways that they're thinking about like how a script should be written. Like, that's too much dialogue. It's probably cut it back because it's a little too old school, and and maybe some of these names would become familiar to me in the industry since I myself live in LA. I got this book from the library, my local library, and I'm just reading books, and I like to read out loud, so I decided to put this out there and do some reading, give me some motivation to finish a book. I'm also writing my own stuff as well, FYI, so I need to read more. Alrighty, good night.